Good evening and welcome to the February 27th, 2024 Board of Commissioners meeting. I am Mayor Pro Tem Gina Hoover, and the Mayor Higdon is currently away on business, so he will not be here tonight. So I'm going to try to fulfill his shoes tonight. Okay, I would like to start by making some introductions, and starting to my left is Assistant Town Manager Malia James, Commissioner Renee Gardner, Commissioner Ken McCool, Town Manager Becky Hawk, Town Attorney Charlie Buckley, Commissioner Mark Tufano, Commissioner Leon Threet, Commissioner John Urban, Town Clerk Lori Canapino, and Jay is not here. Was he here supposed to be here tonight? Oh, there he is. Okay, Jay, our planning director, is back in the audience. And Communications Officer Maureen Keith. Moment of reflection and invocation, Commissioner McCool.
Good evening. In honor of the final week of Black History Month, I want to share a quote by Martin Luther King Jr. I feel like this quote is relevant on how it applies to us in our meeting tonight. He said a very short quote and said, "The time is always right to do what is right. Tonight, let's remember that we are here to serve the people of Matthews and to make good decisions on behalf of them. Let us try to do right by all in our meeting tonight." Thank you.
Thank you. Please join me and the board for the Pledge of Allegiance. Now we'll adopt the agenda. Any additions, deletions, or movements within the agenda can be done now. Do I have a motion?
Yes, I would like to move consent agenda item 9C to new business as 10D.
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda as amended by Commissioner Tufano.
Second.
All in favor? Unanimous. Public comment. Anyone who is registered in advance will speak first, and after that, anyone in the audience who wishes to speak may do so. Speakers have 5 minutes. Anyone interested in speaking about one of the public hearing items should wait until that item comes up in the agenda. Those in the room can line up at the podium. Those in the Zoom audience can use Zoom's raise hand feature. If you're on a desktop or mobile device, click raise hand and the webinar controls. You'll be recognized by the name listed in your Zoom window. If you've joined by telephone, dial *9 to raise your hand, and you'll be recognized by your telephone number. Once you're called on, please unmute yourself, turn on your camera if you have one, and state your name for the record. You will have 5 minutes to speak. Maureen will call on people by name and number. Jay will set the 5-minute timer, and please cite your name before speaking. Our first speaker is Stacy McKe.
Hi, my name is Stacy McKe, and my address is 1116 Queens Road, Charlotte, North Carolina. First, I want to thank Mayor Pro Tem Hoover and the commissioners and staff for allowing me to speak today to the people of Matthews. As you may or may not have noticed, we've got an election going on. You'd have to have been blind, right, coming into the town hall today because of all the campaign signs that we have that are outside. I'm running in the Republican primary for North Carolina Senate District 42. Why am I running? Well, primarily because I'm concerned about the direction that our country is going. I think the lack of leadership that we have in Washington is creating problems that are affecting us, certainly in the state of North Carolina and even here in Matthews. Crime is at record levels. Last year alone, we had a 200% increase in overdoses in the Charlotte area as a consequence of fentanyl pouring over the open border. Our education system is being used more for politics than for basic learning. And we need to get back to just to a basic reading and writing and doing math. And third, people are having trouble making ends meet. With high inflation the way that it is, it's made things particularly difficult for average families. As your next state senator, I propose to address all of these issues. I'm a doer, not a talker. I currently serve as the general counsel for Mecklenburg County's Republican Party. And in that role, I made election integrity a top priority, making sure that we had sufficient Republican judges in place in the polls so that we had the appropriate balance between Democrats and Republicans at each poll site. As a member of the board of directors of the Republican Women of Greater Charlotte, I served as their head of public policy, legislation and public policy. And there I collaborated with Moms for Liberty, put together a petition, and lobbied the halls of the General Assembly on behalf of the Parents' Bill of Rights, which has become law. So parents now in North Carolina have greater transparency about what their children are being taught and have a voice in terms of in that regard. I'm just a little on my background. I'm the daughter of a veteran of three wars, decorated veteran of 3 wars, and a mother who taught me the right values, the values I'm sure most of you were raised with, the value of getting a good education, of hard work, of faith, and a family. But with that background, I went on to Baylor University, where I got a degree in economics and finance. And then was selected actually out of my training program at the bank to serve on Ronald Reagan's presidential task force that brought private sector practices to the federal government. We ended up with hundreds of recommendations that were implemented at the federal government level. After that, I worked during the day to put myself through Georgetown Law School at night and was recruited by one of the top law firms in the country, Skadden Arps, where I worked hard to make partner. Eventually, I was recruited by Bank of America, where I served as one of their top executives. And when I say top executive, I mean top 100 executives. I was what they call a Band 1 employee. I mentioned that largely because in that role, as a top executive for Bank of America, for the consumer group, I managed a budget of $30 billion, the team, of course, but we managed a budget of $30 billion, which just happens to be our state budget. So I know a thing or two about fiscal responsibility and making ends meet and working with large numbers. I've received a number of high-profile endorsements that I wanted to bring to your attention. First of all, I was endorsed this week. For those of you who believe in the America First agenda, I was endorsed this week by Robert Lighthizer. That may not be a name that's familiar to everybody, but Robert Lighthizer has spent his career fighting to keep American jobs here in America and to keep American manufacturing here in America. He served first as chief of staff for Bob Dole, where he helped Ronald Reagan put forward the tax cuts and the fiscal changes that Reagan put in place. And then he went on to serve as the U.S. Trade Representative Office under 2 presidents, Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump, where he's a member of the cabinet. Do you remember when under the Trump administration we renegotiated
Ms.
NAFTA?
McKe, your 5 minutes is up.
5 minutes is
sorry.
up. Anyway, this is I'd encourage you all to take a look at my website take a look at my website, which has more information on my background. And of course, I ask for your vote, not just for me, but for the state of North Carolina. Thank you all.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Pat Robinson.
Robinson, I live at 518 Deer Creek Drive. I appreciate you letting me speak. I'm here to present a petition asking you to please ban all Airbnbs in residential areas where the homes are zoned single family, and all of a sudden, all these Airbnbs are popping up. Like there's 2 on Vinecrest, there's 1 on Deer Creek, there's 1 on Edgeland, there's 1 in Country Place. We went door to door. We have over 100 signatures. We went door to door, and just about everybody is against it. And they said they don't understand how when it's zoned single family, how they can put an Airbnb in. And I can tell you, the house next door to my daughter sold several months ago, and it has 4 bedrooms. Over Christmas, there were loads of people like just staying in there, I guess because there's 4 bedrooms and it's not safe. There's a school bus stop right in front of the house, and you've got people from out of state. And this is a residential area. This is not a town. This is not a tourist attraction. So I don't understand. And like I said, a lot of people that I knocked on their door said, how in the world does an Airbnb show up in a residential area? So we have a petition, and I can get lots more because everybody I knocked on their door, they were all against it. My daughter, the house that sold next door to her, it's been a nightmare since this happened. And so I know she and her husband are going to speak. So I'm here to present this petition of over 100 people. And I ask that you please ban in residential areas. If you want to have them uptown, that's one thing, but this is not safe in a residential area. Thank you so much for listening. Did you submit that to
Anyone else in the audience that would like to speak? If you would, please cite your name. Thank you.
I'm Joseph Martin. I am Pat Robinson's son-in-law. So yes, the Airbnb is now beside our house. I kind of prepared something to say because I get kind of nervous up here and I want to write down my notes, so I apologize. First off, good evening. Hope you all have had a great day today. Had a good weekend, enjoying this nice weather today. Been able to get out into it a little bit. But I'd like to talk about the Airbnbs in Matthews. I've never stayed at an Airbnb. I'm not opposed to staying at Airbnb as long as it's in a vacation destination like Myrtle Beach, Charleston, Savannah, Wilmington, Asheville. Don't really consider Matthews a vacation destination. I know we are close to Charlotte, but still we're not to that extreme. I know Matthews has a lot to offer with all the restaurants, the bars, the things to do in town with the sports complex, but that's for its residents and surrounding area. As I've researched on Airbnb's websites about background checks, they can't perform background checks on everyone. With that being said, who's to say that a registered sexual offender can or cannot stay at these Airbnbs? When you go on vacation with your family and stay at a hotel resort or a short-term rental, you kind of have that in the back of your head. You may be in the vicinity of, registered sex offenders. But when you are at your house, you're registered, you can see these sex offenders on websites and know that they're near you or whatnot. That way you know where to keep your family safe. But with an Airbnb, how do you know that someone is actually a registered sex offender or not? Like my mother-in-law was saying, right across the street from our next door neighbor's house is a bus stop that has children at these bus stops. You don't know if they are going to be compromised in a sense. How will the parents know this Airbnb is housing a registered sex offender? So with this being said, I'm against short-term rentals, and my safety in the city has been compromised due to this. I never have really been afraid to have my wife be at home alone, but now with this Airbnb beside us, I am constantly looking at my security cameras, making sure there's no foul play going on, making sure that she's safe. But this is taken away from my work. It's emotionally exhausting, it's mentally exhausting, and it's just not fair that we have to take this extra step in the security and safety of our families. With these Airbnbs, they are using it beside us to throw get-togethers, parties, birthday parties, Christmas parties. With that being said, they were parking. I understand the road is a public place, but they're parking up and down the roads in front of our houses that did not leave room for my family to come over and be able to park in front of our house or in our driveway. And they had to find other places to park. And I just think that was rude and just not appropriate. Even I text the owner of the Airbnb, and it says in his house rules that they can't park on the road, but they're not following house rules. So obviously, he said they're not going to. There's just people that will follow. There's some people that are not going to follow. So I pray that you hear this from us, that you will ban the short-term rentals out of the city of Matthews or out of the residential neighborhoods. And to go off of Martin Luther King Jr.'s quote that Ken McCool said earlier, I am one of the many people in Matthews. I'm one of the many people that need to be protected, and we need to do what's best for the people. And what's best for the people right now is to get rid of these Airbnbs or have sanctions on these Airbnbs in the city of Matthews. Thank you. Thank you for your service. I do appreciate it. That's what this country's great. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Follow up on him. I did prepare something. I'm going to read it so that I stay within 5 minutes. Yes, my name is Dana Martin and I live at 425 Vinecrest Drive. Thank you for this opportunity to voice my concerns. More than a year ago, a neighbor, a few houses down, turned his house into an Airbnb / his residence. He lives there, which made me then and continues to make me uneasy, mostly because the Airbnb looks directly into our backyard. Imagine how I feel now that we have an Airbnb beside us. I've lived in Matthews my entire life and have only felt unsafe in this community when our house was broken into when I was a child. That's no longer the case because now I feel unsafe in my yard and in my own home because of the Airbnb beside us. Recently, I took our dogs out in our backyard early in the morning while it was still dark and didn't realize that a stranger was literally 4 to 5 steps away from me at the Airbnb. One day I took out the trash only to see a man that I didn't know standing in our yard a few steps away from me, staring at me. He was nowhere near the yard of the Airbnb, though he was there to visit someone staying at the Airbnb. On several occasions, I've come home before my husband only to find a car parked in front of our house with no one in it. So instantly I start to look around to see whose car it is, where they are, for safety measures. No one at that time was in the Airbnb driveway or in front of the Airbnb. And on each occurrence, a person that drove the car came out of the Airbnb. There is a bus stop near our house and the Airbnbs, and children and adolescents can often be seen walking down the street. If the company Airbnb is truly checking to be sure the renters are not sex offenders, which personally seems super daunting to me, I'm sure they're not checking the record of every single person that comes to visit the people renting an Airbnb. And I can attest to the fact that the Airbnb beside us tends to have a lot of visitors and people staying there. It is alarming to think that only one person with bad intent may see a vulnerability or something they can take advantage of in our neighborhoods. My expertise is in community public health nursing, so I know and have seen the things that can happen in communities. Because of my background, I believe it's better to be proactive rather than reactive. So I'm asking the town council to please be proactive by banning short-term rentals in our neighborhoods so that we don't have to react to something bad that could potentially happen. Lastly, I want to leave you with a thought, a question. How would you feel if you had an Airbnb beside your house and your family? There is a safety concern or a potential safety concern. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Maureen, is anyone on Zoom? Oh, was someone else? I'm sorry, we do have one more person. I'm sorry.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Nicole Sidman. I'm running for House District 105, which is a slightly redrawn district here in Matthews. My name is Nicole Sidman. Again, I am a mother, a former teacher and lawyer, and I am currently serving as the Director of Congregational Life in my congregation, where I work closely with over 800 families to work on interfaith community building. And so that is really the perspective I bring to this role of building community, coming across lines, and finding commonality and ways to serve. At my heart is serving the community is really what inspires me. I'm running because, as many of you may know, the districts have been redrawn again. This is now a district that Trish Cotham will be representing as Republican, and I'm running as Democrat to run against her because I feel that it is important that our communities know who our representatives are and know where their districts are. And I really think that it is time to stop the gerrymandering, stop trying to find voters, and instead let the voters pick their representatives. So that's really my main goal, is to fight against the gerrymandering. When we do that, we can break the supermajority, and then we can have some actual conversations and some negotiations and have a representation in Raleigh that reflects the voters. Currently, with the supermajority, the people in Raleigh really don't need to listen to us. I have gone many times to Raleigh to talk to my representatives. They don't meet with me because they don't have to. So I intend to make a representative, put the represent back in representation, and really focus on serving the people of my district. Again, my name is Nicole Sidman. You've probably seen a lot of my signs lately, so I apologize for that. My website is nicolefornc.com, and I would welcome any questions or any conversation after this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is anyone else in the audience would like to speak? Okay, now Maureen, is anyone on Zoom? Okay, thank you.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, hello. My name is Dr. William Norman, and I've been a resident of Matthews for about 8 years now. And I would like to support everyone here that is speaking out against this. I don't feel safe with having convicted pedophiles living amongst us. And it seems that there's an increase with these gay pride events, and they're trying to groom our children. I mean, gays are only 2% of the population, yet they're 33% of all child molesters. 67% of them have AIDS, and 78% have STDs. They have a lifespan that is 30 years shorter than normal. 28% of gay men have 1,000 or more sexual partners, and 23% of children who had lesbian mothers were sexually touched by a parent or another adult. Rape and sexual assault before the age of 16 are strongly correlated with homosexual behavior. Homosexuality is 3 times more fatal than smoking or extreme obesity. Gay bug chasers promote the spread of HIV to unwitting sexual partners. And I also would like to raise the fact that the rise in transgenderism is directly correlated with 4,000% explosion in kids identifying as transgender. They are too young to make these decisions for themselves. They should not be cutting off their genitals. This is ridiculous, okay? Magnus Hirschfeld was a Jewish sexologist in Weimar, Germany, and is considered the pioneer of transgenderism. He created the Institute of Sexual Research, where he performed the first ever sex change surgery. Since then, transgenderism has exploded in popularity. We cannot procreate if we have all these people believe in this. I mean, this used to be considered a mental illness. These people would be put to clinics, but instead, the number of children sent to gender clinics has quadrupled. This is so out of line with our values. I believe in freedom, but this is also correlated with abortion, which many babies are killed in. I mean, say what you will about that, but it's also with the pornography and the hookup culture, which is also run by every single corporation that owns these pornography things that are pushing these things on children. For instance, I just found out that there was a pedophile in this area, and he just got busted for having child pornography on his phone. And these companies are owned by Jewish people. This is ridiculous. Al Goldstein, Gary Kremen, Adam Glasser, Mike Coolidge, Sam Roth, Nathan Abrams, Sean Rad, Ron Jeremy, Greg Lansky, Sol Simhai, Fabian Thielman, Ruben Sturman, Stephanie Packard, Steve Ornstein, David F. Friedman. These are the ones that run Pornhub. They run OkCupid. They run Grindr. They run Tinder. They run Match, Slade. I mean, X Hamster, Bang Bros. I mean, there's so many of these. And when you really look into it, and for more information, you can go to GTV Flyers and figure this out. But also, I would like to say that the ADL was established in 1913 to protect a Jewish child murdering pedophile named Leo Frank, who tried to blame it on a black man, Jim Conley. So why is this organization in charge of determining hate speech and censoring Americans? My ancestors fought, like probably many of y'all here in this council meeting, so that we had a secured constitution, which is the First Amendment, our right to free speech. But I don't think that dictates under the freedom of religion that these rabbis are hiding in these tunnels, for instance, like in New York City, and they have this practice after they circumcise the baby where they place their mouth on the baby's genitals and they suck the blood off of it. This is pedophilia. If a Catholic priest or an Islamic person or a pagan or just any other person in our society was putting their mouth on a baby's penis after they just cut it and sucking the blood and giving them herpes, you can go to nyc.gov and see that it's clear that many babies have died from this. Okay. And this is because we are soft on the immigration. We are soft on what's being taught to our children. The Hart-Celler Act was passed in 1965, which lowered the standards of who we let in here. We have an open border right now with third world invaders that are coming in, and we know they're criminals because they're coming in illegally. I know people that are paying thousands and tens of thousands of dollars to try to come in the right way, and they're left on a waiting list for 10, 12 years. Okay. And you can go and look at this. Henry Ford knew about this. He wrote a book called
Mr. Norman, thank you. Your 5 minutes is up.
GTVFlyers.com.
I have a comment. Did you purposely turn the sound down on this man?
I
You
asked
are
for
not
the
allowed
sound
to
to be
censor me.
turned
I
down.
will
It
file
was
a 1983 civil rights violation.
You can still hear him, Mr. Stefano, and
A single act. No, I refuse to step down on this. This man, although we may not agree with him and we find it, maybe some of us find it repulsive, you have no right to turn down the volume on this man. No right.
Mr. Stefano, I do not need to hear from anybody about putting their mouth on a child's genitals. Whether I agree with him or not, the language that he used was offensive on every level. It does not matter what my political situation is, what I believe or what I do not believe. The language that he was using was offensive. It was anti-Semitic, it was homophobic, it was transphobic, but most of all, it was disgusting.
It doesn't matter. You're not the one that decides who can speak and who cannot speak. And if you turn down the volume on another speaker in this hall ever again, so help me.
Everybody in this room could hear him speak. His voice was still
burned. The volume was turned down.
Yes, sir, but everybody could still hear him.
Okay, let's please calm down and let's move forward, please. Thank you. Someone else is here. Okay.
There's still someone speaking. Well, I think we need to get through comments.
Okay, we have one more Maureen to speak.
Can you hear
Zoom.
me? Hello, can you hear me?
Attorney Buckley, I would like to ask a question before we move on to the next public comment.
Hello, can you hear me?
The volume, if it is audible, does that play a role in public comment?
The question is, was anybody denied the right to hear what he was saying? Well, we're not going to be judge and jury on this tonight.
Let's move on to the next public speaker, please. Thank you.
Yeah, can you guys hear me all right? Hello?
We can hear you, sir.
You can proceed.
Okay. All right. Hi, my name is Fred. So yeah, I've been a supporter of free speech for my whole life, and I'll make this quick, and then I'll get on to my main topic. And I do want to say that whenever the government decides what is acceptable and what is not, you're opening yourselves up for a 42 USC 1983 lawsuit, a federal lawsuit for deprivation of civil rights. So that's a serious, and that can cost the city, the town, whomever, a lot of money. So I would strongly caution you against that. Even if it's speech you don't like, you don't have a right to shut it down as long as there's no direct threats, or very narrow exceptions. You pretty much have to sit there and enjoy it. So I did want to ask for a resolution condemning communism, and I'm going to start with a quote by Stephen Wise. Some may call it communism, but I call it what it is, Judaism. And why is that? So we can look, Karl Marx, everyone knows Karl Marx. You know what he was born? Moses Mordecai Levy, Vladimir Lenin, Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, Russian names. Got Leon Trotsky. He was born Lev Bronstein, Jewish. They murdered millions of Christians in an event called the Holodomor in Ukraine. That's the real Holocaust, because the so-called Holocaust has been disproven time and time again. It never happened. Also like to talk about the Talmud. You ever heard of the Talmud? It's the Jewish holy book. They might say the Torah is their holy book, but no, it's actually the Talmud. And there's quotes like, Yebamoth 98a, all non-Jew children are animals. Sanhedrin 57a, when a Jew murders a non-Jew, there will be no death penalty. Kethuboth 11b, a man who has engaged in intercourse with a girl less than 3 years of age has done nothing. That's disgusting. Shabbath 116a, Jews must destroy books of the Christians, for example, the New Testament. Baba Metzia 114b, the non-Jews are not human, they are beasts. Zohar Toldoth Noah 63b, when the Messiah comes, every Jew will have 2,800 slaves. Gittin 57a, Jesus is in hell being boiled in hot excrement. Baba Kama 113a, Jews may use lies to circumvent the non-Jews. Sanhedrin 57a, what a Jew steals from a non-Jew, he may keep. Sanhedrin 58b, if a non-Jew hits a Jew, he must be killed. Jalkut Reubenai Gadol 12b, the souls of non-Jews come from impure spirits and are called pigs. Y'all cut 245C. Extermination of the Christians is a necessary sacrifice. Zohar 1160A. Jews must always try to deceive Christians. And these are God's chosen people, really, when that's their holy book that promotes pedophilia and killing of anyone that's not them. They're the chosen. Anyway, they're the ones behind mass immigration. They're all of Joe Biden's cabinet. They're all of Trump's donors. They're the ones behind gun control, abortion, the COVID agenda. I don't really want to read all these names, but it's a long list of names. You can look at all this stuff. It's all available for free on gtvflyers.com. gtvflyers.com. That's where you can find all this information. And that I'd encourage any of you, all of you, to look it up, try to disprove any of it, because it's all facts. They call it anti-Semitism, but they never call it lies, because it's not a lie. These are facts. Should wake up. That's all. I think I'm going to yield the rest of my time. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bill Shaner. Am I coming through all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Fantastic. Tonight, I would like to talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity. This is a program right now being recommended by the federal government, the government, to be imposed on schools. It's being imposed in many workplaces through HR departments. It's being imposed in a lot of places. And in regards to diversity, inclusion, and equity, I would like to see that policy, if it's being enforced in many aspects of our daily lives, that perhaps it is also enforced in our federal cabinet. I mean, if we look at the current cabinet, you have Janet Yellen, the Secretary of the Treasury. She's Jewish. Anthony Blinken, Secretary of State. He's a Jew. Wendy Sherman, Deputy of Secretary of State. Jew. Merrick Garland, the Attorney General. Jew. Alejandro Mayorkas, Secretary of Homeland Security. Jew. Victoria Nuland, Secretary for Political Affairs. Jew. Eric Lander, Office of the Science and Technology Policy. Jew. Avril Haines, Director of National Intelligence. Jew. Ron Klain, the White House Chief of Staff. He's a Jew. David S. Cohen, the Director of the CIA. Guess what? He's also a Jew. The Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer Pritzker is a transgender Jew. And the 4-star Admiral Rachel Levine, the U.S. Assistant Secretary of Health, is also a transgender Jew. Now, 80% of our current cabinet is Jewish. How is that diversity? How does that represent the American people and the American state as a whole, as a nation? It would make sense if America was 80% Jewish, but Jewish people are only a 2% minority in America. So it really doesn't make any sense. Even our last cabinet and our previous president, Mr. Donald Trump, all of his funding, the majority of his funders, they were all Jews. Now, like I said, I thought we lived in America. I didn't think we lived in Israel. Yes, I know we're out there all the time in the Middle East fighting wars for Israel, but that doesn't mean that we should be so overrepresented by this small minority of people who are known to sacrifice children and drink their blood and bake matzahs with children's blood in them during Passover. It's just disgusting. And then you have the ADL trying to protect them, when I think it was said earlier that the ADL was established in 1913 to protect a Jewish child murdering pedophile named Leo Frank. Why is this organization in charge of determining hate speech for Americans when they're founded to protect a child raping pedophile? He killed and raped Mary Fagan. She was 13 years old in Georgia in 1913. And I would just like to end with, diversity means fewer white people, inclusion means the exclusion of white people, and equity means stealing from white people. Watch Europe at thelastbattle.net and visit gtvflyers.com. Thank you. I'm going to see the rest of my time.
Well, whoever thought
Denman.
Go ahead, Mr. Deadman.
that's Deadman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Well, whoever thought that I might be a breath of fresh air for you to hear? Because yeah, I know that is a pretty good one. Just a quick one. I couldn't help but chime in on, I don't know what happened here tonight. I don't know where all those folks came from. I wonder if they really live in Matthews. I will say, you can tell Renee to come back and have a chair now. I'm not going to say anything outrageous. I will make one. I know it's a difficult thing to listen to some folks, and I know it's a tough job. And sometimes people say things we don't want to hear. But I know some folks on this panel in their social media have blocked or deleted people they didn't like their ideas. I've been a victim of that on a couple of folks on that panel. And to Mr. Tufano's point, as long as there is a freedom of speech, unless they're making a direct physical threat to you, you've got to listen to them and you've got to hear them out. And I would say that is part of the job. And I will say that I don't know where Miss Gardner is at the moment, but you can't just walk out either, because you are actually being discriminatory when you don't sit down and listen to what they have to say. You may not like it. I get it. I didn't like it either. I actually listened to it just like you guys did with my mouth open. But I will say, whether you like it or not, they have a right to speak, and you have to listen whether you like it or not. And all I can say is, I don't envy you on that one. I don't know what the heck happened tonight, but hopefully they've gotten their air out and it'll be a peaceful evening. Anyway, but I just wanted to chime in as far as they do have that right, and like it or not. And Charlie might even have to agree on that one. So I hope you guys have a good evening, and thank you for the moment to just give you a little reprieve. How's that? Have a good night.
Thank you.
You can go ahead with your comments, Mr. Rockwell.
Mr. Rockwell, are you there? Ms. Conger? Hello?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Fantastic. My name is Molly Cogner. My goodness, some of those previous callers. I actually do a podcast, and recently we've been discussing a lot of anti-Semitism, which has thrown me into the depths of research. While I was doing this, I actually found a very questionable religious practice that apparently is completely legal in the US, and today I'd like to raise some awareness about it. So this religious practice, which is completely legal, has been going on for a very long time. It's called circumcision. However, they do it differently. They take an 8-day-old baby in a open room. This is not in a hospital. This is happening in people's living rooms with a bunch of people around them. They take this 8-day-old baby, they bring him to a partial erection, they cut the baby, and then they orally molest him with their mouth. It's called oral suction. If you go on nyc.gov, you'll see that people are aware it's happened. I mean, there's a government website that talks about this and even talks about the babies dying of herpes. But for some reason, it's still a completely legal practice. I did more research on it because I always grew up thinking that it was just more hygienic to have that done, and that's why men were snipped. Turns out that's a falsehood. There's been lots of studies conducted that have shown that it actually is dirtier. So not only have we been lied to with the premise that we were, making our babies cleaner, but on the same time, we're allowing them to be orally molested by rabbis. It's literal legal pedophilia. And I went into this research assuming that I would find some great talking points and be able to boost up Jewish people, but I find myself disgusted that they have such a hold on this government that they're allowed to molest babies, to give them herpes. Babies are dying legally. And I find myself hard pressed to stand up for a group that would do that. And I find myself standing with the anti-Semites, with people that most of you would refer to as neo-Nazis. And that is a really hard time to live in. When you are pressed between choosing Nazis or pedophiles, I sincerely hope you choose the side of the Nazis. I hope you have a wonderful night. God bless.
Thank you. Mr. Conley?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, I'll be brief. I just wanted to say, first off, I wanted to thank the council for respecting the First Amendment. I really applaud you for that. Thank you very much. And what I really wanted to talk about was I wanted to request the council to consider drafting a resolution to designate June 8th as a day to honor the USS Liberty. And for anybody who's not aware, June 8th, 1967, Israeli forces tried to sink a U.S. Navy ship called the USS Liberty, which killed 34 American servicemen and wounded 174 others. The Liberty crew is one of the most decorated in U.S. naval history, yet for decades this attack has been covered up and misrepresented. Justice for Liberty is a documentary that was filmed at the crew's 54th anniversary reunion in Pensacola, Florida. You can watch that documentary at justiceforliberty.org, and it includes testimony from several of the servicemen that were on the ship that day. Some of those quotes are 2 hours of pure hell. It was no accident. There was no mistaking who we were. It was divine intervention that the ship stayed afloat. It was absolutely a deliberate attack. Congress just looked the other way. So I hope we can start to acknowledge the sacrifices our servicemen made on that day by honoring at least one day out of the year to recognize those men. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandish?
Hi, how's it going? I'm Sandesh. How are you? I wanted to talk about an Airbnb that I'm a property manager. If you can hear me okay, I'm just going to read out some of the inquiries that we received for our Matthews location, just to give you a feeling of who books an Airbnb and stays in Matthews, right? So I have, hi, I'm visiting friends and family for Thanksgiving. I have 2 dogs and I'm traveling with children. Please let me up. Your property would be perfect for all of us. Another one is I'm visiting with my kids. Again, traveling with pets. Property would be great. Planning a family Christmas trip. Your space would be perfect for all of us. meeting friends and family, traveling with kids to visit our grandparents who live in Matthews or in the area. If anyone's traveled with kids, you probably know that it's hard to confine yourself to a hotel space. It's very difficult to just adjust with a tiny one bedroom or at max a two bedroom space. Please keep that in mind when we are evaluating Airbnbs. This is a great way of one bringing more people to the city. It also gives a welcoming space for people traveling with families and pets. Yeah, that's all I wanted to comment about. And again, thanks for the space for free speech, and yeah, everyone's being heard.
Thank you. Okay, sir, please state your name.
Hi, my name is Ian Goldstein. Really interesting meeting to come to, gotta say. This is my first one. Can't say I haven't heard all these things before. You know, it's the world we live in, and it comes on both sides. Freedom of speech. I love saying whatever I want to say. It's pretty good. I've also stayed at Airbnbs. They make sense. I'd rather do that than stay at a hotel. Depends on where I'm going, friends, family, vacation, whatever it may be. Again, my name is Ian Goldstein. If you have any questions or anything, let me know. My son was circumcised in a hospital. Let's see, what else? I celebrate Christmas. I actually prefer it over Hanukkah. I do both. I have a son. We're going to do both. I'm really not religious or anything. You know, I don't believe in God or any of that, which I know is messed up, right? I'm going to hell. It's fine. We'll be okay. But that's me, right? I could decide to go ahead and do that. And you can say whatever you want about anybody, and that's okay. I can do the same. But I don't want to. I'm just wasting everybody's time here because I want to talk about the politics and the whole reason that we're here in Matthews and make it a better place. So I guess I want to see if we can do a better way to have communication in this open quorum that's directly related to Matthews politically. And you could say whatever you want in that in freedom of speech. I mean, just let's not waste each other's time and money because I'm pretty sure we're paying all of you guys right now for this, which is fine, but not right. So let's use that money for something else. I don't know. We could do better. I'll run for president someday. I don't know. All right. That's it.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Hoover. First, I want to say that some of these comments tonight have been sickening, disgusting, infuriating. They do not represent what the town of Matthews is or what we believe, and I am so sorry to anyone who had to hear that. With that being said, may I please request that we take a 5 to 10 minute recess?
Yes, let's please take a 5-minute recess. comprehensive downtown plan.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Unanimous? Okay, intent to close a portion of the right-of-way of Pleasant Hill Drive continued from January 22nd. The Board of Commissioners has declared an intent to close Pleasant Hill Drive beginning at its intersection with Covenant Church Lane and running in a northeasterly direction 900 plus or minus feet to its terminus or at near the old Matthews Cemetery. And tonight we have Town Engineer Susan Habina Woodlard. I'm getting it out. Woodlard. Yay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Hoover. This will be short. Staff is requesting that the public hearing be continued until July. I wrote July, and then Lori reminded me that the second meeting in July is typically canceled. So actually, we'd like to amend that to continue it to the second meeting in August. We do know that the DOT did put the surplus right-of-way at the Board of Transportation meeting. So we want to wait for the result of that and work on a few other things with the petitioner. So that is the request tonight, is to continue to August.
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we continue this item to August, correct me if I'm wrong, 26th, 2024.
Second.
All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Comprehensive downtown plan. The comprehensive plan and downtown plan will guide development in Matthews, provide a roadmap for future growth, and create strategies to implement the community's vision. And we have Planning Director Jay Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Hoover. Welcome, everyone. I have to first say this is the culmination of really not just 12 to 14 months of work, but about 4 years at the town's planning conference. I recall back in March 2020 that we first had a conversation about the need to desperately needing to update our town's future land use plan and comprehensive plan. For everyone in the audience, if you haven't been to it, do a web search for Envision Matthews. That's where you'll find the draft to our future land use plan and comprehensive plan. With that, I want to turn this over to our very talented consultant team. Matt Nooncaster is going to kick us off with an overview of this new document. So, Matt.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, good evening. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen at the dais, for having us back to talk more about the comprehensive plan. Thank you to those in the audience for listening to our presentation. As Jay said, if you haven't seen it yet, please go to the website, doing a Google search for Envision Matthews. You can read the document. We are in the middle of taking public comment, so there are still opportunities to influence the plan as you read it as well. So this evening, as part of the public hearing process, we wanted to give a brief overview. When you look at the agenda, the bark is worse than the bite. We're not going to go that long. We just want to hit the highlights, knowing that the document itself is now the spotlight. You can read what you want in there to know really where the direction is. So with the spotlight being on the document for this evening, what we want to make sure we do is just make sure you're comfortable with the way it's set up, the way it's structured, what's in there. And again, we can continue to take comment for a longer period. For this evening's presentation, I'll be joined by Lorna Allen and Ben Hitchings, who will also cover parts of the topics that were in the agenda, but I'll try to go quickly for us all. So I wanted to just highlight very specifically why even have a plan and what is it supposed to do for you. And so in the document itself, we don't beat around the bush. You go right to page 3 and 4, and we try to hit you right away with what this plan is, why it's created, what it's supposed to be used for. And generally speaking, it's supposed to try to get everybody on the same page, right? And get people on the same page at a very broad level so that everyone and all your momentum can be moving in the same direction. It is not the last word on many topics. In fact, it sets up topics that then are addressed in things like your zoning or your capital improvements plan or other plans and studies that you do. But this does organize them all as you go through the process. And if there are any skeptics about the comprehensive plan and why you have to do it, if we just boil it right down to it, this is out of North Carolina General Statutes, and it says very clearly under 160D-501 that if you want to have zoning and shape development in your community, you must have a comprehensive plan. So at its bare roots, you need to check the box so you have a comprehensive plan. Now, most communities who go through a process like this, 12 to 14 months in length, spending a lot of money to do it, want to make it more than a check the box activity. And that's what you all have done. We've really kind of wrestled some issues as we went through the process. And I think you have a document that represents some strong consensus building within the community. So to that end, also with the document and what it's used for, when you have a rezoning request that comes in front of you as well, you will make a statement of consistency with the comprehensive plan. And that'll be something that you can use in your justification for making decisions at the dais about rezoning applications. So again, it's good to get ahead and know kind of what your vision is for the community. And then also maybe being more proactive. So instead of just receiving a development application and having to make a decision on it, you also should be proactive, and you get to take the comprehensive plan and then implement it through your unified development ordinance that you have, and actually get ahead of the game on what you want and creating intended outcomes and shared wins and expectations. And so again, the comprehensive plan does that for you as well. You'll also hear me at times talk about the comprehensive plan being the tip of the spear, meaning that there's a lot behind it that still needs to be done and what it is. But again, if you want something to happen in your community, a lot of times you plant the seeds in this document. And so whether it's your town budget and how you set up your priorities, or if there are other plans that need to be done either by you or others, you can slide your plan over to NCDOT, you can slide your plan over to CRTPO and say, this is where our vision is. We'd like you to consider it when you're making your recommendations. And then into your regulations, whether it's subdivision or zoning, again, under your unified development ordinance, a lot of that action and the justification comes from the comprehensive plan that you have adopted. So because of that, and again, we take the plan very serious, we have a approach that we've been following for the last 12 to 14 months that tries to commingle the engagement and the input that we get from the community with the data and the analysis that we were able to either collect or evaluate, and then some best practices where we've been able to say, yes, that has worked somewhere else, or no, that has not worked somewhere else. Let's do it a little bit differently. And that's where the consultant team and town staff have been able to provide a lot of input as well. So let's just say, for example, you didn't know this document existed, and I had to tell you very quickly sort of where does it lean? Where's the compass point in this type of a document, and Matthews specifically? So it didn't take long to hear residents celebrate the small town charm of Matthews and to say they want to safeguard it and protect it and the future decisions that are made. And then we recognize where we are in the world. There are a lot of big city pressures at your doorstep. And so how do you create a document that kind of, for lack of a better term, pushes back a little bit and sets your stance and gets your feet underneath you about what you want to be for the decades to come? This document tries to do that. There's an extremely strong dedication to community character in this plan. Again, page 4 is where we tell you right away that that's the expectation. And whether it's the chapter that's specifically about downtown and downtown guidelines, there are tons of eyes and interests in downtown, or even just what neighborhoods look like, or what is a mixed use community or an activity center. What do all these apartments, what do they mean, and what do they look like, and how do they change the landscape for you? We've tried to address some of that in the plan. And to do that, we have to recognize that there are really 3 conditions that you're wrestling with right now as a community. One is you have vacant land left that's unprotected, so something can't happen there. There are private property rights that exist in this state, and we've called that our last frontier, and I'll go over that in just a minute on some maps. But really, those are areas where you can shape the outcome of development where there are large pieces of property left and they're currently vacant. So we have recommendations that go for that initiative. But then we also recognize that you have a lot of neighborhoods in place right now that are strong, stable, and want to stay that way. And so, but there are pieces and properties within some of those neighborhoods that are still vacant. And so you'll see when I present some of the maps to you, we talk about what happens in those conditions. You know, how do we not rock the boat too much? And so we have small infill opportunities, but then we also expand it out to either downtown or John Street or other areas where we want to be very sensitive to what's already on the ground today. And then we have a bucket of recommendations and mapped areas that we call site redevelopment. And these are places that might be aging, maybe like the US 74 corridor and some of the larger retail shops. And what do you do there in the decades to come? But also supporting things like the hospital as they continue to invest in their property and become a regional magnet in the area. How do you support that type of stuff as well? The document does take a stance on light rail development. There's been a lot of discussions about where and when, and then how much development comes around the stations. The plan makes recommendations on that. And overall, we're trying to create a document that has greater predictability, creates stronger bridges, and more intentional outcomes. And it might be something like recognizing that your infrastructure is aging. And so while we all want to put money into cutting ribbons on new things, the time has come to have to operate, maintain, and even replace or rehabilitate some of the things you have now to keep them useful and viable. And so you're a community that's maturing. And so how do you do some of that? And then how do we put things in this plan that sets you up well, whether it's a zoning change later on, the downtown design guidelines that'll be brought up, or other matters? We want to make sure that this document puts you in a good position. And just to remind you, or to introduce to others, we actually have two geographies that we're working at with this plan. We have the town-wide comprehensive plan that you see on the left. And it deals with issues at a little higher level because it has a larger geography that it's interested in. And then we also have specific recommendations about the downtown area. And we'll get in more detail there because the geography shrinks. So it gives you more opportunity to get in more detail. And again, I'll let Lorna talk about some of those things for you tonight. So with that cue, I'm going to let her come up and talk to you about the process and engagement. We're just going to kind of move around the microphone as a team.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me back. So I won't belabor this. So we've mentioned 12 to 14 months, but we are getting towards the end of our process and have a draft plan out for public comment now. Just want to reiterate that we've had public engagement opportunities throughout this plan and just give a kudos and a hats off to y'all staff. I know I've said it before, but I really want to say it again. They have been very instrumental in increasing engagement and input through this process from the variety of opportunities. From the onset of developing a public engagement plan that was really designed to make sure that we had a diversity of voices at the table. So creating different opportunities for people to weigh in on the plan throughout the process. So making sure that we had ways and opportunities throughout that varied. So here are a couple examples of those. We did have a community advisory committee that you all helped with appointing to that committee. We have a technical committee where we met continuous with town staff, county staff, transit agency, NCDOT state staff. We have been before you all before with some briefings about where we are in the process. We've held 2 open houses and various pop-ups, working very closely with staff to be at events like the farmers market and others. As well as working with some of the key neighborhood groups and preparing what we call meetings in a box or takeaway meetings so that people can have smaller group conversations. We've worked to create a very specific brand for the plan. Your plan is called Envision Matthews. It's really envisioning the next decades to come for the community and how the community will take shape. And we also put out a very dedicated survey about the process and giving people opportunities to start shape ideas for recommendations in the plan. I mentioned the takeaway meetings. Here are some examples of some of our community advisory committee members. Some as young as 12 participated in this process, and a really great representation of students, property owners, renters, business professionals, all represented in these groups. Also, we would like to create very simple ways for people to provide engagement. So just writing down some thoughts about how they envision Matthews in the future. So this is an example of our postcards to the future. And then, as I mentioned, we did hold 2 open houses through the process. So this is our final open house pictured here. First open house pictured here with one of our younger community advisory committee members pictured in the blue t-shirt. I did want to mention again that this we're still open for hearing from the public. For those interested in looking at the plan, I do have the link at the bottom there. I apologize for those here with QR code, as it is a little obscured, but it is publicinput.com/envisioned Matthews. On that website link, you can provide your comment. And here's an example of what we've been hearing so far. A lot of ideas around the downtown regarding character, ideas about density. So we've started to kind of comb through those a little bit, but we will be receiving more throughout the month of March. So with that, I'm going to pass this back over to Matt to get into some of the specifics.
All right, again, just wanted to make sure that you're very comfortable with the way the plan and how it's set up and those kind of things. So I'm going to talk more about the mechanics of how these things work. And again, during the public comment period, we can get into specific parcels or areas or those kind of things. But so chapter 2 on here is called the Growth and Conservation Framework. In some ways, I call it sort of the heart of the comprehensive plan, because again, one of the main charges of the comprehensive plan is to map your future. It's the one document that has these maps that go edge to edge within your planning jurisdiction. And we've actually created a 3-map series in order to give greater predictability and more intended outcomes for the community. We have the general framework map on the left, the conservation development map in the middle, and a development change and intensity map on the right. And I'll dive into each of those quickly here for you. But first, kind of how they work together, right? So I want you to think of this if you are a resident, whether you're an elected official, if you're a developer, if you're just somebody interested in the community, how do I sift through these 3 maps to figure out what the intentions are to be? So when you start with the general framework you have, it's basically telling you from the highest level where you want to see investment and where you want to see kind of a hold phase going on. Once you know that, you kind of decide, well, what generally am I looking for? Am I looking for residential or retail or a mix of uses or the like? And it just starts to set expectations and context. And then development change map actually extrudes things, and you start to think 3-dimensionally about the form and design of these places. And as you go through those 3 things, you start to say, okay, I get what this place is supposed to be and what it's going to look like. And then zoning takes over and gets even more specific in that regard. So we didn't just make this stuff up. We've been developing it both out in front, but also in the background through the entire process. Lorna had mentioned the community open houses and workshops we'd gone through. We also used the website to try to reach more people in terms of collecting attitudes and getting opinions about some of the alternatives that we had put out there. But now what we've done is we've gone into the draft document. The consultant first recommended the map series. Town staff was able to provide comments and revisions, and then we put them in the draft document, and we anticipate we'll get more comments as we go through the process. So first, the general framework map. Again, depending which lens you want to think about, elected official, resident, developer, some other idea, the first thing you would do is look at this general framework map. And what it tells you right off the bat is where is change anticipated and where is change not anticipated. So I'm going to flip just here to the descriptions, and I'll come back to the map so you can see the representation of it. But if you're in the more tan colored area on this map, you're either an open space right now, a park or a floodplain or something of that nature, or your existing development that we're expecting not to change. So again, if you go back, this is where I told you about the stability and the strength of your neighborhoods. If you look at about 80% of that map is we're telling the community we want to keep it as it is. It should stay the same. So that's kind of where that comes from. Then you go back to the blue, and I told you there were some parcels even deep within neighborhoods or small slivers left over along roads that do have rights to develop. And so we call those our enhanced category, and that's vacant land, but because it's either so small or where it's located, we're advocating for you to do more of the same. So again, when you look at these little areas that are specks of blue, and I know it's hard to tell on the screen, but they're kind of all over the place, but we're basically saying take your cues from what surrounds you in order to know what to develop and what would be acceptable. Then you get to the areas in purple. Now that's that large swath of vacant land that we talk about. And this is where you have a chance to do something new and have influence and input on kind of where you want to shape that future to go. And if you look at it, it's primarily the land south of I-485 between US 74 and John Street, Old Monroe. And everybody knows that's kind of the last, remember I told you the last frontier. That's the last area that people are like, what's going to happen there? And so we do have some position statements on that. And then the last one is areas to transform. And those are areas that are already existing today, but they might need to redevelop when you're looking decades out into the future just because they get tired or the market changes or things of that nature. And so you see there, you have the US 74 corridor and the commercial shopping that's there. You have the hospital, again, because we want to support their initiatives and efforts. And, you know, as we contemplate what might go on Old Monroe Road up near where there's a light rail station proposed and stuff, if that stuff needs to redevelop, there should be opinions given on what that might be. But again, if you kind of look at the areas and the amount of land versus the amount of change, again, I'd guess about 80% of it's really just a hold phase. We're trying to celebrate what you've already done. So again, if you're the public, it either puts your mind at ease or gets you excited about a certain place. You kind of have intentions of what to do, and the developer looks at it and kind of gets to say, all right, well, it's not even worth moving forward in these areas because I know that the community doesn't want to do anything. So that's really what this map does, is set expectations at a very high level. The second map that we have here is called the Conservation Development Map. So again, in those areas that are being preserved, and you see the large yellow swaths all over the place that are existing neighborhoods, that's really just a cataloging exercise. It's basically describing what's already there. And those areas to strengthen or transform, it's giving some direction about what might happen in the future. And so when you look at that and you go to the color and find the matching color on the pages that follow the map, you see there's a lot of information about what the intentions might be for that place. So there's a narrative just kind of setting the tone. Then there's comments about the building and the massing that might occur, the blocks, the street network, open space, transportation. Again, trying to set those expectations early enough that you can use this plan in a rezoning process instead of having to wait to your zoning ordinance to take care of that stuff. And what it's trying to do, again, is make the murky more clear, right? Just trying to get a little bit ahead in your process with more clarity and predictability so that everybody either understands what they're getting into or what the outcomes could be. When you go into these, as I've already described, kind of how they're broken down, each category has a spread like this that is 1 or 2 pages in order to give more clarity to what that color means on the map. Now, the third map is what I call the development change and intensity map. This is what I was describing to you. These are where things extrude and come to life, and you can actually feel what it might be like to walk and experience those places. So things like how big are the blocks? How tall are the buildings? What kind of parking do you have? Those kind of things are all described here. And I go back to that opening about small town charm and big city pressures and those kind of things. I will say that as we went through the scenario planning process, we are all over the place in terms of how high and how dense of development to occur. If you get to the darkest red bottom color that you see there, there's really limited to the area north of the Sportsplex, the area around the proposed light rail station in that last frontier area, the hospital, and then the area up Monroe Road near the other light rail station. Right now, at least, it's saying that the top end of the range of those buildings is only 6 stories. Now that might feel like a lot to some people in the community, but speaking kind of academically or nationally, 6 stories around a transit stop is actually quite low in terms of getting that development within walking distance of the station. And so there were compromises made in this plan, again, with the idea of small town charm in mind. And so again, when you go to those colors on the map, we then also have different levels here, so you can kind of understand whether you're open space, leave it alone, leave things existing suburban. Are you going to allow infill at all? What type is it allowed in the surrounding environment? And then it just kind of goes on to how much more development might be anticipated or appreciated in some of the activity centers that are identified. And then again, as I was mentioning, and kind of you have to run through the finish line. So on the left-hand side is kind of where the comprehensive plan stops. So we're kind of up in a hot air balloon and we're figuring out the lay of the land, but it's really the devil in the details in terms of the ordinance itself. And that's where a lot of this stuff will get worked out. Sometimes the comments and questions we get back are like, why don't you have a 6-foot berm with landscaping here? And be like, great idea for zoning to talk about. Like sometimes we don't want to get too specific in the plan that we create boxes for ourselves. And so this is just an example where I showed you a 1-page where it had narrative and bullets. This might be from a zoning ordinance where you start to get more detail on permitted uses and side yard setbacks and measuring lot coverage and things. And then it continues on again and talks about landscaping and fences and parking and all of that kind of stuff. So this is the stuff that has to come in the UDO revisions that you would take forth after the comprehensive plan is adopted. So then I'll just end real quick on supporting infrastructure, because again, it was brought up that your infrastructure is aging. So we did try to make sure that if you have all this demand for services created in chapter 2, chapter 3 is about the supply. How do you start to meet some of those needs? And we do it at the most basic level in 2 ways. One is we have maps like this for open space where we talk about where ideal locations might be as development occurs to put additional open space in order to mitigate the intensity of development in some areas. And so for that, you would use this map, and maybe a development application comes in and you say, hey, you're in an area that we're also calling for open space. So how are you working that into your plan and your design? So that's what this map does. It kind of sets the expectation for infrastructure, both what and where. And then we have other maps in the place that say we recognize that others take care of that service, in this case, transit, so CATS and what they're doing. Well, this is how our development overlays with you. And this is how we think that you should be able to support our development pattern better for moving people within the community, not just automobiles. And then lastly, we just have some coordination activities that you go through. And here again, we're saying, while the town of Matthews has a lot of responsibilities, you're not the final word on a lot of things that are offered within the region, transit being a great example. And so how do you communicate clearly with your different service providers about what you want for your future? So that's in the document as well.
So within the document, we do dive a little bit deeper into some key focus areas. These are located kind of in key areas that we really want to dive into the detail to understand what needs to be preserved versus what needs to change. So we looked at 3 key areas, one being off of the Independence corridor, where you have large shopping retailers and large shopping centers. The other being along Matthews Mint Hill, where we expect to see the Silver Line corridor. And then the final being your downtown, which we do provide a lot more detail in regards to design guidelines for supporting that existing character and future opportunities. So if we're looking at the US 74 and C51 area to help orient y'all, in the bottom left-hand corner is your target, which is still drawn in this picture today. But looking at the changes to how US 74 would be altered, but also thinking about as these shopping centers change over the coming years, are there opportunities to introduce new types of uses, but also keep retail as a base? So thinking about supporting more walkable centers and having them transform into what we call lifestyle centers. So not only do they have your big box stores, but they also have places that you can comfortably walk to and smaller scale retail uses and restaurant establishments, but also thinking too about how to get more housetops in an area like this. So if you look off to the corner on the right-hand side, we're showing opportunity for redevelopment of maybe potential more housing units that would front along your existing greenway system. So you're putting rooftops, homes close by to recreation, but also within walking distance to retail and other uses. So here is just an artist's depiction of how one of those community centers could transition over the years to provide a variety of mix of uses. With all of our focus areas, we have provided a case study example that is on the right-hand side. This is Mashpee Commons in Mashpee, Massachusetts. It's one of our older examples that we'd like to use of a successful aging retailing shopping center that was transformed using a variety of methods such as updating frontages to providing new uses in the shopping center to make it a very lively, very walkable community. Our second focus area is along Matthews Mint Hill. Novant, to help orient you all, Novant is just to the top left of this area. So in this area, we're looking at opportunities to think about how aging properties, industrial properties could transition over time to provide different types of uses, different workspace types as we're starting to see the office space, workspace kind of transition, especially with the effects of COVID on how people experience work. thinking about how we can provide opportunities for more housing that would also be consistent in supporting ridership with the Silver Line light rail. And thinking about also mobility, supporting different uses around a future trail system that would tie into your existing trail system along this corridor as well. And then this is just an example of an artist's rendering of an example of kind of a mix of those spaces, old and new, working together to create a very lively, walkable neighborhood along transit. And in this example, we're using a former industrial campus in Charlotte called Camp North End that has repositioned itself as a true mixed-use community with residential coming online later this year, but adapted buildings for office space, creative retail space, restaurants, and more. And then finally, I want to dive us into the downtown plan. And I just want to preface that this was a really great part of the plan to work on, just because so much of what we heard about Matthews and Matthews' character and identity is held in downtown. People really feel that downtown is the heart of the community. So when we were thinking through that, we rested on one of the great vision statements that you all had already developed about downtown being this true destination within the region, with a great reputation for being a center of dining and entertainment and really thriving local businesses. And we wanted to work with you all to develop a plan that stayed pedestrian friendly, with beautiful streetscapes, that was safe and inviting, and look for ways that you can have additional opportunities for mixed use development to support what's already great about downtown. So as we were working with the community, and what we were hearing were the priorities are charm and character at the forefront. Looking to see how we can provide more rooftops or housing downtown so that people don't have to drive, they can walk, and support the local businesses. Thinking about connectivity for the neighborhoods in and around downtown, so how people can get to downtown more safely and more efficiently if they want to bike or walk. And I have downtown housing twice. It must be that exciting. The way we organize this plan is really thinking about the way your zoning is already kind of set up, is looking at your different districts. So our first district is the kind of the wider district in the lighter color. That's District 1. That's kind of encompasses the South Trade Community Arts District, the North End District, and the West John Historic District. And then our more specific, smaller district is District 2, which is really what is your historic urban core. In the hatching colors, that is where we're recommending to grow your overlays so that we can incorporate some specific parcels that just weren't included previously. So as we're looking at these different districts, we're also thinking about the character. So I mentioned the 4 just earlier. So we're really paying attention to the distinct aspects of these parts of downtown that are very unique, and paying attention to things like transportation, how those are working, historic properties, and understanding how the edges with where these characteristics align. So within downtown, we're looking at opportunities for preservation of what is existing and really great. So that's depicted in the white. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner, that's the Town Hall Library, just for orientation. And thinking through where there may be opportunities to provide additional infill. So those are the darker color little rectangles. Thinking about open space and opportunities for public open space. We heard so much from this community about wanting places to gather downtown. There's so much love for Stumptown Park, but a lot of people just want more. They want bigger space. So we looked at a couple different opportunities for that. And one of our recommendations is to explore through the potential with Matthews Elementary is maybe a pairing of open space with that property. So again, we are looking for case studies in downtown. And I will say we've already received some feedback about some of the case studies, and we are looking for other options for downtown that we think will better align. I will take this moment to say too that we're looking for some other images that we're going to be trading out. We're working with staff on that to make sure that that really exemplifies the character of Matthews. So we are definitely hearing from the community, staff, and others about this. So I just wanted to let you all know that those changes are being made. Okay. So this is going to set you all up for kind of your next step after you move on, life after the comp plan, and thinking about your UDO. So what we did with working with staff very closely is develop these design guidelines, and it's really divided into kind of 3 sections. The first being your public right-of-way, and that's essentially everything that does not include private property. It's your streets, your sidewalks, your street trees, those types of spaces. So we're trying to give you all a framework for should a new street be developed? What type of street should it be? What type of components does it have? Does it have on-street parking? How wide are the sidewalks? Where should the trash cans go? Those types of things. So we've thought through those items and have laid them out in your design guidelines. We've also looked at the site level to think about how future development may look in your downtown. And I have this map up in the right-hand corner here to kind of reiterate too. We've paid very close attention to context and proximities to other uses and kind of districts. So when we're thinking about a historic district with residential homes, we want to be very cognizant about setbacks, making sure there's enough space between different uses, making sure the heights aren't overlooking into spaces that they shouldn't be. So we worked very closely with staff to understand what those spaces need to be looking like, and as far as like height and proximity to streets and property lines. And then finally, the last piece of the puzzle is building design. So we started to gather information on architectural character, facades, articulation, massing, thinking about how porches and steps and things interact with the public realm, making sure that you have entrances where entrances need to be, so that you're not wandering around looking how to get into a shop. So these are kind of the things that we were thinking about when developing these design guidelines. And I'm going to pass this off to Ben, who's going to be the last piece of our presentation, but the very important piece, the implementation piece, and he's going to close us out.
Thanks so much, Lorna. Great to be with you all this evening. So we've done all this planning work together as a community to update your vision for the town in the years ahead. And now we want to help you move effectively and efficiently to begin advancing that vision on the ground. So what we've done is take the 12 goals in the plan that were derived from your strategic plan that you adopted last year, and organize different implementation strategies under those 12 goals. All of the different implementation projects fall into 4 categories. Either they are techniques for using ordinances and development standards. They might be projects that represent public investments. They might be projects that involve developing new programs or policies for the town. Or in some cases, they might be new studies or plans for specific areas in the community to bring additional detail to the vision outlined in this townwide comprehensive plan. Altogether, working with staff and stakeholders in the community, we identified 65 different implementation projects. That's a lot of projects. So one of the things we did was also work with the project team to identify which projects were maybe more suitable for pursuing in the short term, which projects might represent medium-term endeavors, and which projects might be things that the town pursues in the long term. In the short term, we think of projects that might be launched within a year or 2 after plan adoption, medium term 3 to 5 years, and longer term 6 to 10 years or so. even so, we still ended up with a lot of short-term projects because there are a lot of interesting and useful things that the town can do to pursue the vision that Matt and Lorna have described this evening. Now, in the plan, you've got two places where we lay out those different implementation projects. You've got the recommendations in section 6, and that is a comprehensive list of those 65 different projects. Again, organized under the 12 goals from your strategic plan. So if you're a member of the community and you care about being able to have safe sidewalks, you can go to the goal that in Vision 2 that addresses vibrant pedestrian accommodation, for example, or Vision 3, walkable and bikeable community. So that the organization is designed to help any reader of the plan find what the town is proposing to pursue to advance each goal embodied in the plan. Now, then the second place that we have implementation projects is in Appendix B. And what this is a table of those projects that were identified as being appropriate for pursuit in the near term. And here, because these are projects that the town will be considering to start work on pretty soon, we include more information. So we have this table. We not only identify the project and describe it, but we also suggest which department might be the lead on any given project. We also talk about what funding level might be appropriate, what funding sources could be tapped to pursue the project. And then something that I've found as a former planning director working in communities here in North Carolina, what are those first few steps we need to pursue to really get this project off the ground? Is it something that we can do with existing staff? And so our key task is simply to program it in our work plan for our department in the next year? Or is it something where it would be helpful to have outside assistance? So maybe we need to develop and issue a request for proposals to get some help from a professional to help us pursue the project. So those kinds of early steps are identified for each of these short-term projects. Again, we still have a lot of projects that we're considering in the short term, so I want to highlight a couple that are common ones that we see communities pursue on the heels of updating their plan. And Matt had mentioned updates to the Unified Development Ordinance, your set of standards, the rules for how any new development in the community can occur. So often we see communities engage in an update of their ordinances as one of the first things they do after plan adoption. We really want our development standards in our community to be aligned with the updated vision. We need to translate that updated future land use map into appropriate zoning categories and districts. Often there are different ideas and concepts and recommendations that need to be codified in the ordinance. And so quite often in working with communities across the state, we see communities pursue a full rewrite of their Unified Development Ordinance. I will tell you a very quick story from personal experience when I was a planning director. One time we did an updated land use plan and transportation plan. We were poised then to update our ordinances, and the Great Recession hit. And the town did not have the money to do that. So several years went by. And so we had an updated plan and an outdated code. And I will tell you, it was pretty frustrating for members of the community, development applicants, elected officials, staff. People would come to us and say, I'd like to do this in your community. Where can you do it? And we would say, well, our plan says here's an appropriate location, but our development standards don't currently allow you to do that. All to highlight the importance of moving apace with updating your development standards. Now, if you aren't able to do a full rewrite, sometimes there are targeted measures that you might prioritize for updating. And so we have just a sampling of different topics drawn from those implementation projects that were identified as part of this process. So you might be looking for ways to add more green space in selected parts of the community. You might be looking to evolve your system for approving new projects. Sounds like your community, like communities I've worked in, uses conditional zoning a lot. And so sometimes there's an opportunity to continue to evolve that framework to help you get what you need as part of new projects and make sure they're compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. There are other topics across the country. We are seeing communities revisit their parking standards, see how much they really need to require in that regard, because so often development projects also are talking to their financiers about parking. And so that often covers what they need in terms of adequate parking. Affordable housing is another national issue. We are not building enough housing. We have a deficit nationwide of about 3 million homes. North Carolina, like every state in the country, has a deficit of housing. And so that has caused housing prices to go up, and in some cases out of reach of folks who help service in our communities, like essential workers, teachers, firefighters, police officers, and the like. And then, as has been mentioned by Matt and Lorna, a cornerstone of your plan is protecting community character. So there are opportunities throughout your development standards to reflect what is in this updated plan to help you do that in the years ahead. Again, we've got more detail on each of these projects. So here's the one for the Unified Development Ordinance, Project 8.01. You can read the details on the additional information. This, for example, would be, of course, a project that would be led by the planning department. Often local governments pair their staff with a development consultant if they're doing, certainly if they're doing a full rewrite. They might bring in some outside help if they're just doing targeted measures, or maybe some of them they can draft internally. Here's a word about the column on funding. One of the things that I found really helpful to know is if I've got a new project, at what level will the approval need to occur to fund that project? If we just need a little bit of money, maybe there are discretionary funds that a department and a department director has. Whenever you have that kind of situation, that allows the town to move more quickly to turn that project from an idea into action on the ground. Then larger projects might require the town manager's authorization, or if they're large enough, they might be something where the project would compete for funding as part of your annual budget process. It might be included in your capital improvements program, or maybe there's a great idea that is just beyond the resources of the town today, but if it manages to secure some third-party funding, like we've seen with, say, rescue funds or the like, maybe that makes it possible to pursue something that y'all have identified as being beneficial for your community. Another early project to consider for adoption is translating those design standards that are described in a preliminary fashion in the plan into actual development standards that would apply to new development projects. There are other early adoption projects as well. And again, here's the detail on that codification of those design guidelines, for example. All right. Once we've finished the plan and developed a good implementation mechanism, the result is this document that now represents your adopted policy as a town for what you want to see in the years ahead as it relates to land use and the related systems. It's meant to embody and help you protect what you love and add what you need in your community, and can be a reference point whenever you're making decisions regarding public investment or development standards or new programs. So you have a draft plan. We have the public hearing that's starting tonight and continuing, as I understand, into your next meeting. We know y'all are still receiving public input online and through other mechanisms. And then once you're ready and comfortable with what's in the plan, then under state law, you are the entity in the town, the only entity that can adopt the plan and make it official for the town of Matthews. So it's been a pleasure working with you to develop this plan, and we look forward to helping you get across the finish line and move on to plan implementation. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mayor Pro Tem Hoover.
Thank you. I would just like to encourage the citizens of Matthews to go on the town website and pull up the Envision Matthews and participate with the public comment section of that. We would really love to hear from everyone. So with that being said, are there any questions or comments from the board?
Yes, I just went to the town website, to the homepage. It was not obvious to me where the link was to this presentation. Can someone help me? So that the public can review the.
Let's see. The presentation is specifically for this evening. There is a whole web page, of course, for the comprehensive plan update.
Got it.
Maybe
got it. Okay, thank you.
Speak to more.
Must have been my resolution on my screen. I didn't see it. Thank you.
problem.
Thank you.
Okay, Jane, to be clear, we are asking to continue this to March 25th. Okay, and do I have? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Is there anyone here to speak tonight against or for this? Okay, so do I have a motion to?
I'll make a motion that we continue this item to March 25th, 2024.
Second.
I'll make a motion that we reconvene the regular meeting.
Second.
Okay, board and committee updates.
Thank you so much.
We will start with Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resource Advisory Committee, Ms. Susan Chambers.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the board. I'm Susan Chambers, the Vice President of the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee. And tonight I'm going to provide you with a brief update on matters currently under our consideration. As of now, our committee is kind of in a state of stasis, waiting on the Envision Matthews plan and our Parks and Rec master plan, which is really just getting started. These inputs will significantly influence our decision on several key areas. There are several park parcels that we are closely monitoring. 3 of them include Windsor Run, the Windsor Run parcel at the corner of McKe and Pleasant Plains. 2 parcels on Sam Newell Road at right across from Tennyson Development and at the corner of Kazai and Sam Newell. The outcomes of Envision Matthews and the master plan will hopefully guide us what we can do with those properties. And then the DeVore property, we're really excited to get something going with it. There's potential for income generating activities on this property and we are exploring various possibilities in this regard. One of the ideas is creating a special events venue to serve the community for weddings, reunions, corporate retreats, and a host of other activities. We feel this is something that's really missing in the community and it could be a great source of revenue for the town. And the future of Stumptown Park, again, depends on the Envision Matthews and the master plan, as well as what CMS is going to do with Matthews Elementary School. And then we have Veterans Memorial Park as part of the future of Stumptown Park. We continue to prioritize further development and maintenance of the Veterans Memorial, recognizing its significance to our community. We are on pace with the completion of the signage installation by Memorial Day of this year. Uten Pottery Project, progress on the Uten Pottery Project is pending further funding and finalization of site plans. We are committed to seeing this project through to its completion. Additional greenway access points and enhancing access to our greenways remains a priority, and we are exploring opportunities to create additional access points for the benefits of our residents. Tourism funds, we plan to explore avenues to allocate tourism funds effectively to promote our town's attractions and cultural resources. And public art placement. The committee feels that the funding of public art should be included as a percentage of park project budget to continue encouragement of art being placed in public spaces. Strategic placement for public art installations enhance the aesthetic appeal of our town and fosters cultural enrichment. And addressing recreation deserts, identifying and addressing areas within our town that lack sufficient recreational opportunities with a view to enhancing the overall well-being of residents. And then finally, maintenance. Maintenance of existing parks is important to the committee. We continue to be the additional eyes in the parks and share feedback with staff related to items that should be addressed. And we look forward to working collaboratively with you in the future for our town's parks, recreation, and cultural resources benefit for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chambers. Corey, did you have anything?
No, I'm just more.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Perfect. Okay.
Not late enough for Corey to be up there.
Now we will move to Matthews Veterans Advisory Committee, Jack Santinello.
I don't know what's worse, doctor's office or here. Waiting. Okay. I'm Jack, Air Force veteran. I'm the chairperson for Matthews Veterans Advisory Committee. I'm here to give you an update, a quarterly update, which we will continue each quarter going forward from this point. Thank you for the news, the good news on the signage. All the veterans here, and there's quite a few, several of us here, appreciate that very much. Okay, moving on. What I would like to cover, and many of you have seen this before, so I won't take a long time. MVAC history and bylaws highlights, current MVAC membership, our accomplishments, current projects, events, and new initiatives. And there's a lot of good news coming up. History. You remember George Fawcett, Army veteran, town commissioner, established MVAC in December 2015. Our first meeting was held 8 years ago on January 6, 2016. Bylaws highlights. This is important. This is why we're here, to improve communication, collaboration, and cooperation with all town departments, personnel, other town communities, and military organizations. American Legion, Veterans of Foreign Wars, and very recently, we've increased our collaboration and communication with the Veterans Bridge Home, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, and the Mecklenburg County Veterans Service Office. Our role, act in an advisory capacity to the town's Board of Commissioners and staff on matters of interest and importance to service members, veterans, and their families. Current officers, myself, Vice Chairperson Margaret, she's here tonight. Treasurer Mike is here tonight. Secretary Sheila, are the four officers. And I gotta say, my wife backs me up all the way. So she's like a semi-officer. Okay. We got quite a diverse group of membership. There are 4 military services represented. In order of importance, Air Force, Marines, Army, and Navy. Only joke on that one. Doug Rose, Army veteran. He was our past NVAC chairperson. Larry Stowicki, retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel, past chairperson, vice chairperson, and a founding member of MVAC. Charlene Thompson, from an Army family. Son is a graduate of West Point. She's our past NVAC secretary. Jim Thurman, an Army veteran. And Stephen Wolfong, a naval veteran who is the current commander of American Legion Post 235. And I got to say, the Post and MVAC are working very closely together on all matters. Moving on. Activities and accomplishments for the past. We contribute to the Queen City Honor Flight, and we stipulate that Matthews veterans receive the funding for their flight. And, the Queen City Honor Flight is not just here in Matthews or in Charlotte, it's across the country. Organizations like ourselves get together and contribute and have veterans, starting with World War II and then Korea and on down, and they take off in the morning, like 6 o'clock in the morning. They go to Washington, D.C. They are moving around, transportation, going to see all the veterans memorials. They come back later at night, and they're a happy group of people. We coordinate the annual Veteran of the Year program once a year on Veterans Day. The mayor offers and honors a Veteran of the Year. We designed 10 reasons to hire a veteran brochure. And I'm going to get back to that in a little bit. We developed, Maureen and us developed the Hometown Hero Banner program. She's done a great job in doing this, and we really appreciate all your help. Developed a veterans discount brochure. I'll get back to that in a second. And we sponsor an annual veteran social event, the Army Navy football game. It was well received this past year. We'll continue this into next December. We had like 40 people, 40 veterans, 50. And I expect we'll see double that this coming December. Okay. The Veteran Discount Pamphlet, the second edition, will be coming out midsummer. I carry copies of that all the time. So let me tell you a story. At least once a week, I'm getting a copy of this discount program. Last Monday at the Levine Senior Activity Center, and then this morning at the same place. Last week, I met an Air Force veteran. This morning, I met a Marine veteran, both of which went to Vietnam. And they did not know about the PACT Act. And so I'm trying to help them understand this. And I want you to know what the PACT Act is all about. We all of us here, I would imagine, have veterans in the family, friends, but this is important. It was this PACT Act, I'll read from my notes. Officially known as a Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson, honoring our promise to address Comprehensive Toxics PACT, P-A-C-T, Act, a new law passed on August 2nd, 2022, that significantly expands VA healthcare and benefits for veterans who have been exposed to burn pits, Agent Orange, and other toxic substances. For veterans who served during the Vietnam War, Gulf Wars, Afghanistan, and post 9/11. It encompasses more than 20 additional presumptive health conditions that are assumed or presumed to be caused by military service in those areas, including 9 cancers, asthma, chronic bronchitis, COPD, and chronic rhinitis. I think I spelled it. Okay. Army Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson died at age 39 on May 6, 2020 from lung cancer caused by toxic exposure to burn pits in Iraq. His family, friends, and other veterans took up the cause to help other veterans. That act authorized $797 billion for this program over the years. So both veterans I met last week and this morning were not aware of this PACT Act. One of the guys said, "Oh, so when you go and you apply for this at the Veterans Service Office, it's possible that you could receive disability." as low as 30%, as much as 100%, depending on what's going on. One of these fellows I met last week said to me, well, I thought disability was just for people who are working. I said, no. This PACT Act helps veterans specifically. So I want you all to know that the PACT Act exists, and that I personally, when I meet people like last week and today, volunteer to take them, which I did, and I will, to the Veteran Service Office for them to sign up for the program. That's one more activity that MVAC is doing for veterans. It's great. Love doing it. Okay. Veteran of the Year nominees, we talked about that. Hometown Hero applications, talked about that. The Levine Senior Center Homeless Veteran Event, every year we collaborate with the American Legion Post 235 and help there with both manpower and funds. Veterans Employment Opportunities, auto dealerships. So let me tell you about that one. Back in December, we totaled one of our cars, and so we had to go replace it. So between December 7th when that happened and December 28th when we finally bought the car, I was going back and forth. We were going back and forth to the dealership over on South Boulevard, South Charlotte Hyundai. In there, our salesperson was a veteran. No, excuse me. He's an active duty reserve Army. Also found out there were veterans in there. A couple back in the mechanics area. One fellow was a finance officer, and a few others. So in several visits going back and forth to talk to buy the car, I met with the owner of that dealership. And I pitched the idea of him putting together a training program for veterans who have experience in mechanics and sales. Think of a recruiter, sales, right? In mechanics, sales, other areas, administration. So he liked the idea. And I mentioned a while ago, we have more communication with other services. And I got a hold of Jackie Donahue, who is a senior employment navigator for Veterans Bridge Home, VBH. She also liked the idea. So they met 2 weeks ago. I was there just to see what's going on. And they're putting together a program at that one dealership to hire veterans who need a job in those areas of experience and train them into their ways. Okay. So that's one dealership. This fellow who owns that dealership, he knows like 30 other dealerships. And I can, in my head, I can see this expanding in a few years throughout the county of Mecklenburg. It's beautiful. Having a place where the veterans go to the Veterans Bridge Home saying they need a job, and having Jackie call a dealership and say, do you have a space here? Do you have a space there? And that's fantastic. So that's one more thing that we're doing as a committee. Oh, when I talked to the owner, I talked about the 10 reasons to hire a veteran. And he gave one of those brochures. They're downstairs, by the way, in a veteran brochure rack. 10 reasons to hire a veteran that MVAC published probably in year 2 or 3 of his existence. Here are the 10 reasons. And I told him this. Leadership, team member, team leader, diversity, flexibility, adaptability, works well under pressure, planning skills, discipline, high work ethic, commitment to excellence, and commitment to service. It's the truth. That is the truth. Most veterans have that in their heart, in their heads. So again, hopefully they will formulate a plan to give these veterans a job. Next. Wreaths Across America. That's once a year in December in local cemeteries. We go, MVAC goes, the Legion goes, we go there and we place wreaths on graves that are marked as veterans. They have over 1,000 veterans in that cemetery. Forest Lawn East. Driven housing opportunity. When I was here meeting with Jackie, I met Matt Smead, who's the Veterans Bridge Home Housing Navigation Manager. I introduced him by phone to Rick Gilbert, who was part of the Home Again Foundation. Matt and Rick had a virtual meeting this morning, and Matt may have somebody, a veteran who has a grandson, okay, and Matt has an opportunity, an apartment opportunity for that lady. That again, so that's something else that we can do. Veteran Bridge Home, they can help veterans find low-cost housing. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to invite commissioners one at a time to attend an MVAC meeting. Some of you have been there already. Gina's there every meeting just about, okay? And I talked to your new guy here. He's coming next week. He's going to join us. That's good. So we will continue that. Okay. I thought I had my notes in good condition here, but. All right, last comment is thank you for your continued support of MVAC. And many thanks to Maureen, Gina, Teresa. Who am I missing? I'm missing somebody. Teresa, Maureen, Gina. I'm missing somebody. Huh? And all the commission, yeah, right. Thanks again. Again, I think this is all good news. I'm happy that I could come up at this time of the meeting, despite my comment before, to give you some good news to go home with. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. We appreciate that so much. Now we'd like to move on to the consent agenda.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve consent agenda items A and B and D through H.
Second.
All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. On to new business. A, received monthly budget report, Finance Director Teresa Falk.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the board. Long time no see. Feels like only yesterday, but there was a day in between that we shared a lot of time in this room. Tonight, we're here to talk about January 2024 finance report. The report that was included in your packet shows that the town is continuing to have growth in the main revenue areas. Ad valorem tax collection percentage is up almost 1% over the same time last year, which is very good. We always like to make sure that we're at least maintaining the same collection rate, if not improving. So that's a positive sign. Local option sales tax has slowed. We're no longer seeing those 25% growth, but we are still 1.76% ahead of year over year growth, which this is the 7th month of the fiscal year, but we've only received 5 months of sales tax. So this does not include December yet, which is usually where it takes a pretty good bump after, for the holidays and the shopping. So I expect the next month's sales tax to be a little better potentially than this. Permits and fees are up 36% year over year, which again indicates a strong economy in the town of Matthews. People are out doing things and making plans and getting their permits. And then recreation revenues are up 30% year over year. We talked a little bit about that this weekend. Corey talked about how they are seeing much better response, and their new system does seem to allow people to register for things a lot easier. So at this point in the fiscal year, things are very solid, numbers are very solid, and we feel very confident in being able to continue this path and meet our budgeted goals for this year.
Okay, any questions or comments for Teresa? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, B, consider betterments for McKe Road. A, transportation planner Dana Stuzinski.
Good evening, everyone. I am here to talk about the McKe Road project. It is a new alignment from John Street to Pleasant Plains. And this action is about the match that we have to pay for the betterments, which is basically the improvements we want to see happen on this roadway. It is $169,912.50. That is 30% of the total cost, which is that $566,375,000. And these numbers were given to us by NCDOT, our partner agency in this project. We did give, at the beginning of this process, we contributed $2 million of our own town money towards right-of-way of this project. And this is the additional costs associated with this project.
Okay, any comments for Dana or questions?
Yes, I do. For the town manager, do you anticipate that the growth in our town revenue will cover this 170,000 in fiscal year 27?
I wouldn't be able to speak to that directly. What I would say is that when we first started down the path of this roadway project, we anticipated that our betterment share would be due in FY25 to the tune of about $105,000. And so we have no concerns about our ability to provide funding 2 fiscal years later for, we realize that it is an increase, but it is relatively small in terms of the total percentage of our budget. So we do not have concerns about the ability to absorb this in FY27.
Is there any anticipation that 170,000 will increase, or is that a fixed number now?
I would defer to staff on that question.
I'm going to bring in backup.
Hello again, Town Engineer Susan Habina Willard. So this will be part of our STIP agreement. This is what we would anticipate paying. However, as we had discussed this weekend, there could be unforeseen things in construction that could cause it to increase, I would say slightly. It's a sidewalk. It's a pretty open area right now. And we didn't see anything in the plans that would cause us concern. But I can't say that we will never see an increase. But it has happened when we've had a STIP agreement that the state has come back and said, you owe us a little bit more. Now, Dana and I will stay on them and make sure that during construction that they are managing their costs, but it is an NCDOT managed project. So we'll do our best to keep it at this cost.
Thank you.
Is there any data to show us exactly where we're doing this work at? I'm trying to imagine. I know the general area, but I'm not exactly sure exactly what we're.
I apologize. I did not put a map in here. I apologize. We can pull up. We can pull something up.
Right, and so I guess, Becky, my question again, following up, is that we're talking that we should not have any tax increase or anything. This is going to be coming out of general funds, these dollars. Have we put it aside, or are we making plans to kind of put it aside, or when it's due, we're going to be looking for it, or do we have a strategy?
So knowing that we have this cost a couple years in advance as we look towards what we will be funding in our CIP for the FY27 budget, we would include this in the FY27 budget that is presented to the board for approval. It would be worked into that budget amount. So we don't expect it to have a notable impact on the CIP a couple years out. It's a long time to plan for what is a relatively small amount of money given the costs of our other projects.
And so Susan just drew a red line, if Maureen can show you. So that is Pleasant Plains to John Street, and that's the new alignment McKe Road, which is a 2-lane facility with a 10-foot multi-use path on the north side and a 5-foot sidewalk on the south side.
Dana, I recognize this is a complicated question to ask, but can you speak to the importance of this road project and the significance of having these betterments?
Yeah, I would say that the significance of this project is you can see it's a connector road. It's a missing link of McKe Road. So you see McKe Road is on the Pleasant Plains side, and then McKe Road is on the John Street side. This is a missing link. This will help divert traffic away from John Street and hopefully to the new Weddington interchange, so that, you know, the Weddington interchange is supposed to, in theory, be done very soon. And this road being constructed will divert traffic and create network, right? We have all these farm to market roads that we're not, and this piece is a missing link in creating that network to create better traffic flow throughout our region. So, and then talking about betterments, you know, just trying to do those improvements to the sidewalks and the multi-use path. We're trying to create opportunities to get people out of their cars and onto the sidewalks. You have to think, you know, down McKe Road past John Street, we have a university. We have, you know, CPCC down there. We have all these people who want to walk and hopefully use our pedestrian infrastructure also as ways to actually get from one place to another, not just for, you know, exercise and recreation. It's for multi-purpose. So I think all of those things, you know, we have Susan and I have methodology. We follow the methodology on creating these, and recommending these things. So, you know, it's just part of the implementation of that greater vision.
Excuse me, is there a scale of economy associated with doing it with the project rather than?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So
because we're getting this 30%. The full cost was 566,000 and change. And so we're paying a fraction of that total cost.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion that we approve the McKe Road tip agreement for the additional pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, which will cost the town $169,912.50 in fiscal year 2027.
I'll second that.
All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
And C, discuss Airbnb operations. Commissioner Tufano, I will turn this over to you.
Thank you. So this was brought to my attention by some citizens here in town, specifically Pat Robinson, but many others as well. As you know, there was a petition just submitted with over 100 signatures on it. So a lot of discussion with Jay on this one. I went into the UDO and did a search for Airbnb and also a search for rent space to get the whole word for rent. I didn't really see anything that addressed the use of a person's home and renting it out as Airbnb. Maybe you can help me with that.
Sure. I looked back at our records back in 2021. I believe we first came to the board. We had some conversations about regulating short-term rentals. We also broached the topic in 22. At the time, we had only 22 active Airbnbs. I don't know what that number is now. It's presumably increased. At the time, the board decided not to take any action on regulation of short-term rentals. One of those reasons being we've had some court cases at the state level that have had kind of a chilling effect on communities regulating them, particularly in Wilmington. Charlie, I don't know if you're familiar with this case. There was a Court of Appeals case where the Airbnb owner filed suit against the city. The city wanted registration for Airbnbs and also wanted to have distance requirements like we do for group homes. That was struck down. So a lot of communities there's been sort of a chilling effect. We also had a bill introduced, I think it was referred back to committee in 23, that would have essentially done away with most ability for local governments to regulate Airbnbs outside of a few very specific items. So it really has put us on ice a little bit. There's this, where do we go from here? Are we going to be sued if we have regulations? Now, that's not to say communities don't regulate them. City of Asheville and I think someone earlier mentioned a lot of areas that see high tourism do have some regulations on the books that limit the maximum number of permits, try to, set it up by district. But the view that I get, and I'm not an attorney, is that the state views them as housing and that they don't see a distinction between whether someone's there a day, week, month, or a year, that it's housing. So that's the challenge for us as planners, is to look at what regulations are available to us that the state's given us ability to create.
Just wanted to ask if my search of the UDO was adequate. In other words, is there truly not any reference to Airbnb rental in the UDO?
So we call them short-term rentals because there's multiple ones, but you're correct. We currently have no regulations regarding short-term rentals.
And I looked for rent, or maybe perhaps I should have looked for rental, but can you point me to the UDO chapter and verse that deals with short-term rentals?
I don't have the chapter and verse memorized. The only reference you're probably going to find is, we discussed this a few months ago with Rainbow Express. It was room renting. That's one of the few references you're going to see.
I'm sorry, would you repeat that?
Room renting.
Room renting?
Mhm.
Yeah, the only one I found was under adult uses for renting a room for less than 10 hours.
Yeah, I haven't looked at that chapter.
Yes. I thought that was interesting in the UDO. But at any rate, thank you very much for that input. What I'm going to do later on, after the other commissioners have a chance to perhaps comment on this, I'd like to get a consensus of the board to perhaps have our town attorney look into this in additional detail to find out what our courses of action could be.
Yeah, and understand the concerns we heard earlier, and we're happy to address it further if we can in any way. So
okay, thank
waiting
you
for that direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Urban?
So, and it may go to Charlie, it may go to Jay, back and forth. It is my understanding that that's sort of hands off in a lot of situations, a lot of communities. But what they've been able to do, like Asheville, Denver, Lake Norman area, I think, et cetera, they have been able to sort of talk about special permits, getting more criteria information about who the renter is, significant deposit. I mean, license numbers. I mean, they really do a vetting aspect of it. So they're not denying you the ability to rent, but they're really ratcheting up the game about providing information about that particular one from that aspect of it. So I guess that's an option to explore without tripping over the legal hazard from that aspect of it. So I don't have a problem in sort of investigating that aspect of it.
Yeah, there was a registration. That was the one item that was specifically struck down by the Court of Appeals.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't do business license.
Yeah, we do not have business licenses.
So yeah, it's not that regulations don't exist, but in some communities, there's maybe also a sense of when is it going to be our turn to be sued over our regulations? Because
and I guess the only other thing is because I know HOAs can stipulate things. I mean, HOAs stipulate, only 10% of the houses in this development would be for rent versus sale, or whatever. So I'm assuming, Charlie, that an HOA could probably apply those waters, but it's not something we would apply.
That's correct, because when you buy into a planned unit development, you already know what the conditions and restrictions are on the use of your property through the HOA and all of the recorded, but they are recorded in your title. So you may not read the booklet that was given to you at your closing,
right?
But it's there, and you bought it knowing full well, quote unquote, full well, what the regulations were on the use of your property within that planned unit development. Whereas there would be nothing in your title if it was just a regulation by a local unit of government as to what that use may or may not do. So there is a big difference between HOAs and their capacity to do things, and towns and their capacity to do things. Right.
Well, if there are no objections from any member of the board, I would like to have our town attorney look into possible courses of action that we can take that are within the scope of our authority. Are there any objections to that?
I don't have any objections, but I would like to point out that this was a very vague line on the agenda with no context. So As a commissioner, I was unable to prepare coming into this conversation. It feels a little bit unfair to anybody who owns short-term rentals to start the conversation without having a full breadth of input. It seems very one-sided and not representational.
Correct, and that's why the word discuss is in there. But it wasn't meant to be a public comment, but perhaps at a future time when it comes up for maybe a UDO change or something of that nature, we can go open for public comment. So if there's no objections to our town attorney investigating alternative courses of action, I would make that motion.
I think I'll make I will object to it based on principle.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I second that.
Any,
So
Commissioner
my discussion is fine tuning. Is it Charlie going to kind of tell us what the law states and where we're at, or are you asking Charlie to find means and methods to put into the ordinance?
Actually, one may lead into the other, but basically both.
I don't know that I want to expend Charlie's time in sort of devising ways in which to cite things. I'd like to sort of understand the sort of lift that we have to make to begin with.
If I may help the board here, I think the only thing that I need to do now is to give you what you can and cannot do and let you and the planning department determine what the UDO ought to be.
Okay.
Yeah, that's adequate.
Better sense.
Yeah, thank you.
is that good with everyone?
That should be a fairly quick study too, because there's just not a lot on it other than that Wilmington case and a couple of other cases. I'm familiar with that Wilmington case, but I'll confess it's been since the case first came out since I've read it. So, but it should be a fairly quick turnaround on this since there's very little in the law on this right now.
Can I also ask, have we had any other complaints in Matthews related to the Airbnb? I know we have one in our neighborhood and we've had few problems, but we've had, we've worked through it, but are there any other complaints you're aware of?
I'm not aware of any offhand because they're not regulated. It would take probably identifying an individual address and then looking to see if there were any, say, police reports or anything related to that address. But without those addresses, it would be difficult to pinpoint specifically to answer your question.
Could we inquire from the police department? Are they aware of any? And maybe from the time that Mr. Buckley bring us that information back, we can also inquire from them. Are they aware of any patterns that we need to be mindful of in our discussion or examination?
We can ask them. I just want to make sure we're setting expectations, given that they wouldn't be logged as such in police reports and whatnot. It would be anecdotal, but certainly happy to have the conversation with them and see if there's anything of substance that they could bring.
Okay, is this something we need Lori to actually make a motion and vote on, or if everyone's in agreement, we can move forward?
Well, we had a motion and a second. I think we need to vote on it.
Okay. What'd you want me to do again?
Just, we need to vote on it.
Right. Okay. Okay. I thought you were going to make a motion.
I already did.
Okay.
And it
I
was
thought you were going to
seconded.
redo it because we
No,
weren't sure what
right.
was going on.
Thank you.
Okay. So, all in favor? That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4 opposed. 1. That's Renee against. And do I have to tell you who's for? Okay. Thank you.
Did you vote?
Pardon me.
Did you vote?
Yes.
I didn't want you to get left out.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we will move on to approve revisions to ordinance 50A solid waste.
And the reason I asked that to be moved was I had some input from the Environmental Advisory Committee stating that they had not had the opportunity to review this prior to it coming to the board. So I don't know, is CJ, are you on?
I am here, yes.
Yeah. Is that a correct statement, CJ?
That is correct.
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion that this item be referred to the Environmental Advisory Committee for review and that it be returned to the board on March 25th meeting.
I would like to comment on this item because I received a similar email from I guess the chair of the Environmental Advisory Committee. I looked over the changes that were made to the solid waste contract and then how they were affected on the UDO, and they're essentially matching up the contract to what the UDO says. I confirmed this with Mr. O'Neill. He apologizes for the oversight, but I would say that this was a mistake of no consequence. Certainly doesn't cost the town anything. And while it is a benefit for the advisory boards to have a look at things, I would bring up a recent example of the Veterans Park when the Park and Rec Advisory Board did not have the chance to look at the columns that were put up that actually did cost the town $17,000. I think it's fair to move on past this and let's go ahead and get the UDO to match up to the solid waste contract.
CJ, is this a time-sensitive situation where this UDO has to be changed this evening?
So this is something that probably should have been done in conjunction with the change to the to the contract. But yeah, there's nothing really time sensitive to this. And again, it was an oversight, not to bring this to the environmental committee.
I'm sorry, did you say there was not anything time sensitive?
That's correct, yes.
Well, in that case, my motion stands since it's not time sensitive and we have a protocol we'd like to adhere to with the Environmental Advisory Committee. I think it would be advantageous for us to do that, and I stand with my motion.
Commissioner Urban?
CJ, of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bullet points on here, in your professional opinion, do any of these rise to the level of an environmental concern? Meaning, business license is off the table, has nothing to do with environmental concern unless, I don't know what it would be. We don't have the ability to add additional trash containers outside, so that's a plus. So, are there any of these items here environmentally sensitive at this stage in the game? Can we not, or can we not just move this forward?
No, none of these items to me rise to the level of being environmentally sensitive.
I'd like to go ahead and make a substitute motion that we go ahead and approve this solid waste ordinance revisions by CJ O'Neill dated February 22nd, 2024.
Second. Ms. Hoover, may I give a brief comment before the mayor's report? Okay. I want to go back and say something about what happened earlier tonight. I feel like I should voice again my disgust about what we witnessed tonight during our public comment. I want to publicly condemn the racist, anti-Semitic, homophobic, and transphobic language that was spoken tonight. That does not represent our wonderful town. I've always known this as a town of love and acceptance. What we witnessed tonight was most likely what experts call a Zoom bombing. As it's been coined in recent years. This is happening on public Zoom comments all over the country and likely perpetrated by the same individuals. I believe that we must all stand up against this hatred and bigotry. Our children and constituents are looking at us to set a good example. I want to apologize to all the people who are in the room tonight, all the people who watched and saw this online. And I want to finally urge our board and staff to discuss options in the future so we can do business of the town without this type of disruption. Thank you.
Comment as well. As I as well believe that the comments made this evening were very difficult to listen to. And some might call it reprehensible, some more strong language. But our founding fathers put the freedom of speech in the First Amendment for a reason. It is without that and without freedom of the press, which are both in that First Amendment, we are of no value as a country. Everything that we fought for, everything that we hold dear can be lost without those two. I agree that it was, to some people, very, very offensive. Even to me, I found it to be very difficult to listen to. But to discriminate against a particular speaker in the way that was done this evening by turning down the volume on one particular person is discriminatory in itself. And that type of abridgment of freedom of speech cannot be tolerated regardless of the content. There are some parts of speech that are not protected. That is hate speech and those that are incite violence and all of that. This has all been covered by the Supreme Court. But what we experienced tonight was the most fundamental of exercises in American democracy. And I hope that we do not discriminate against speakers in the future as we did this evening.
I would like to make a counterpoint and say that we in no way said that we wanted to stop freedom of speech and lowering the volume. And we have confirmed with multiple people in the audience that they could still hear it, even though it was lowered. We have the right to lower it so long as people can hear it. I think you are projecting something that did not happen. We were not trying to take away someone's freedom of speech right. And I think we need to look inward before.
I think from a legal stand, we need to not be pointing fingers right now on an issue that where those comments can come back and hurt the town of Matthews in a lawsuit against us. So I think we need to look at our code of ethics and see what kind of conduct we should do as a board and your relationship with each other during a meeting. So I would advise you to go back and look at our code of ethics before we start pointing fingers during a board meeting.
I also just separately would like take everyone to Google what's a Zoom bombing, because you can see this has happened in multiple smaller communities all over the country. I think most recently in West Orange County or West Orange Township. It just happened. So it's a common theme happening in other communities as well.
Okay, we're going to move forward. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to answer, but I think it was indicated we have never had anything like that before. And so we don't have a model to follow of what our response needs to be. And that'll be a discussion we need to have later on, how best to address that going forward. However, I think if we're going to lean in any direction, we must lean toward constitutional rights of the citizens of Matthews. As much as we would hate and do despise certain communications, as elected officials, we must represent all of Matthews, even the ones we disagree with. So we've got some work to do on our end, but I do think we've got to lean toward the direction of constitutional rights of our citizens.
We do have that model, and that is the U.S. Constitution.
And
Okay, that's enough. We are going to now go to town attorney's report.
I have no report, Mayor.
Thank you. Town manager's report.
I would just like to thank the mayor, board, and staff for a successful planning conference last Friday and Saturday, and thank everyone for their efforts. It was a safe, respectful, and professional environment, and I hope that we are able to provide that in all cases moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Putting something of that magnitude together is extraordinary, and I just want to give an applause. Yeah.
Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Okay, all in favor?